Ooh, that's a question. What makes the best leftovers?
I mean, for me, it's always pizza.
Ooh,
But I can eat
pizza's a good
pizza
one.
cold or hot. Often
Is
cold
it like
when
your
it's
cereal?
leftover.
Do you like it soggy too?
No, gross.
Oh my god,
Gross.
it's so gross. Soggy
What's
pizza.
wrong with a little soggy pizza? You put
Actually-
it in the refrigerator and then it congeals.
You're
And
right.
then you've got crusty pizza.
You know, actually, I would eat soggy pizza too.
I like my pie crusty though. So.
Yeah. My favorite leftovers, I love my vegan mac and cheese. I don't like regular mac and cheese. Like when I ate dairy, I did not like regular mac and cheese as a leftover, but vegan mac and cheese, I don't know what it is, but the one I make, holy shit, it's so good as a leftover. It's good cold, it's good hot. I love it. It's great.
Nice.
Sweet.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Dave?
What, for food?
Yeah, what do we like for leftovers?
I mean, I can always go in for the cold pizza, especially if it's pepperoni.
Oh,
Because
yes.
then you get a little bit of the crunch. Hopefully, when you got it hot,
Yeah.
the pepperoni was just a little bit burnt on the edges.
Mm-hmm.
So then
Sorry,
it still
Megan.
got that crunch.
I said, I'm sorry, Megan. This must be like nightmare material for you.
That's all right. I mean, I do watch cooking shows sometimes, so sometimes I have to fast forward those parts because it really is a nightmare. Yeah, but I can hear a little bit of meat talk. It's okay.
Meat talk, my favorite kind.
All I can think about is the swinging dicks comment from before.
That really was meat talk.
That was meat talk.
We were talking
yes.
about some serious pepperoni sticks there.
Oh my god. What is happening? The show has descended
Oh my
into
God.
juvenile territory.
Wow.
And it wouldn't be the
I mean,
first
dick
time.
jokes are
Nope.
funny.
Are they?
You just laughed your ass
That's
off,
true,
dude.
I did.
Somewhere in the middle of Arizona, you painted a desert and called it my home. You made it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance film critic, editor of Bitchflix, and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
My name is Evan Crean. I'm editor for The Independent. I'm co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly and Orlando Weekly, and I'm a member of BAFCA and bleedy bleedy blee.
You know, when you said Dave Riedel, I don't know why, but I almost was like, yeah, you are.
It's because Evan is
It's
always
'cause I
just
was
like,
doing
yeah,
it.
you do.
I know.
Whenever I go last.
I feel like you can't just let it hang after.
Like a hanging Chad.
Yes.
Like a big swinging dick.
Oh, my God.
In case I edit out that part, everybody listening, this has been a theme off mic.
Yeah. Careful, you'll poke your chat out.
Oh, my God.
What are you doing to me?
There's too many dick jokes. I can't. What is happening? All right. Now we're going to step away from the genitalia for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And back
Just for a moment.
Only for a moment. We'll come back. Don't worry. This week, we're going to talk about some films from the Boston Israeli Film Fest. We're going to talk about films from the Boston SciFi Film Fest. And we're going to talk about Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys are as excited about all that as I am. All right. So we're going to kick the show off by talking about Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which unfortunately you guys have not seen yet.
No.
But I have. I got to see it last year, and it was hands down, without a question, my number one favorite film of the year because it's fucking amazing. So I already talked about this film briefly when I did my roundup of films for Independent Film Fest's Fall Focus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so damn good, and it comes out. Well, actually, when this episode airs, it will be out,
Right.
Because it's out on Friday, February 14th, which is
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. And I have to say, there's nothing that warms the cockles of my bitter black heart more than a lesbian love story from a queer woman filmmaker. So yes, yes, and yes.
On
that
Valentine's
warms
Day.
my
Yes.
heart too. So rock and roll.
Yay! Do you have a bitter black heart too?
Oh, for sure.
actually-
It's charcoal. I mean, it's like, dude, if I could tell you about my week.
Oh no.
Yeah. But that's another story. That's another novel for another day.
I want to read that novel. I bet it's good.
Mm.
Might be a little morose, but I think it's gonna be good. I actually don't think I have a bitter heart. I say that jokingly, but I don't actually think I do. I mean, I'm cynical slightly, but anyway, I digress. Back to Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is written and directed by Céline Sciamma, who is a French filmmaker, and all of her films deal with gender and queerness because she is a queer woman filmmaker, and she is brilliant, and I've loved every film I've seen of hers, and I always get excited when she comes out with a new film because I feel like she just gets better and better and better every film. I just love more and more and more. And this film is just, it's gorgeous. The cinematography is done, I cannot think of the woman's name at the moment, but the woman who did the cinematography also worked on Maddie Diop's film Atlantics, another French film, which is gorgeous and stunning and amazing. And this film is just incredible. So the film starts off where there's a woman who is teaching a class on painting, and she's teaching young women how to paint. And one of her students uncovers a painting, and she's like, "Who did this?" And it's this beautiful picture. It's kind of like bluish and greenish, and there's like this center of the picture has like this orange fire going on. And the woman who's teaching the class just looks horrified, and she's like, "That's the Portrait of a Lady on Fire," and she just looks like stunned, and she looks wrecked, emotionally devastated. And she talks about how it was a picture from long ago, about someone from long ago.
Okay.
And then it cuts to her in a boat, and she's on her way to this island, and you find out that she's going to be doing a portrait of another woman. And the reason she's doing this portrait is so this woman who is engaged to a man who has a rich man who's never met her, he can see what she looks like, because obviously there's no cameras
Right.
because it's a period
Otherwise,
piece.
Portrait, sir, didn't happen.
Right. Nice. Yeah. So she goes and she talks with the woman's mother, and the woman's mother is like, "Oh, she's fired every single painter who was going to do her portrait, and they were all men. So I wanted to hire a woman. I thought that she might be more amenable to you." So the mother leaves. She has to go on a trip somewhere, and she's like, "When I get back, I hope the portrait is done." And so the two women meet, and the woman who's going to be painted, who's engaged to be married, she's like, our introduction to her visually is her running away in this flowing cape, and then the cowl of her cape falls, and she's like this gorgeous woman that clearly the painter is finds arresting, and they slowly become friends, and or really not so slowly, because this movie takes place only a short matter of time. But
Yeah.
But that's the really interesting thing, is that this film feels like it's taking its time, even though it's really in a short, compressed amount of time.
Yeah.
And that to me speaks really to how well the writing is, and the cinematography, and just the acting and everything about it. And so these two women become friends, and then there's a servant girl who's also there on the island too, and she becomes pregnant, and she wants to have an abortion, and so they take her to someone who can do that for her. And there's this scene of women chanting and singing, and it's just this really kind of cool scene. And a lot of the film is just the two women talking about what they want from life and what their hopes and dreams are. And it's about their longing glances and their gestures, and everything is just weighted with meaning and desire and emotion. And everything is just like right under the surface. And so then, so the women eventually become lovers, and they, and this film is just such a sensual, beautiful film. And what I love too is that so often films are titillating for the male gaze and objectify women. And this film never feels that way. It just feels like it's telling this beautiful love story, this forbidden love story. And seeing a film like this through the female gaze is just so empowering and stunning and just beautiful and gorgeous, and I could just go on and on with more compliments to it. But anyway, so the women, you know it's coming because you've seen in the beginning of the film that they're not together, so you know it's coming, and it's just which also gives everything more gravity and weight and bittersweetness to it. And so eventually it's time, you know, for the painter to leave, and because she's been doing the painting throughout, and she finally is about to leave, and the woman who's being painted, she doesn't want to say goodbye, and then they finally do say goodbye, and it's just, and then the film flashes forward a little bit, and you see the painter in a gallery, and she's seeing other people's artwork, and she sees a portrait of the woman she's fallen in love with, and she has a child. But in the picture, I can't remember exactly what it is because it's been a while since I've seen the film, but there's something that she like gave to her, or there's something in the photo, like not the photo, the portrait that clearly is a reference to their love. And so it's just amazing. So then she sees her again a little bit later. She sees her at the symphony or the opera. It's the opera. And they had talked about the opera, and the woman who was painted, who was engaged to be married, she'd never seen the opera. And the woman who was the painter, she had traveled more and she had seen operas, and she was talking about how stunning and beautiful the music is and how moving. And so they're at the opera, but they're like completely separate. And the woman who's the painter is like watching her through her glasses. And the final scene is the woman who was painted just sobbing at the opera and being moved by the music and clearly remembering their love and how they're not together anymore. And it's so good. It's so good. It kind of reminds me of the end of Call Me By Your Name, when Timothée Chalamet is just like sobbing.
Yeah, it's like fire.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. But it's beautiful. It's amazing. The two women who are the leads are just phenomenal. The acting is just incredible. Their chemistry is incredible. Everything about this film is just perfection. Everything. I can't say enough good things about it. I can't wait till you guys see it. I want to hear your thoughts. And listeners, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Because it's amazing.
Go see it for Valentine's Day, bitches.
Yeah. Go see it with your lovers or your friends or by yourself. Whatever. There's self-love. Self-love's important too. But anyway, it's an amazing film. It's gorgeous.
I was gonna say whatever floats your boat, but that didn't feel appropriate. So I guess whatever paints your portrait.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. Yeah, and the discussions they have, and I have to say this too before we move on, the discussions that they have about gender roles and about expectations for women, they're so pointed and thought-provoking and so spot on, and it's this film is just great. It's amazing. Anyway, I love it.
Sounds awesome. I'm anxious to see it.
Yes.
Now it's finally coming out in Boston.
Finally, I know it took long enough.
Like, I understand strategically why they delayed it, but it's still obnoxious. It took forever.
Pisses me off. Somebody asked me this last year. They're like, how do you feel about the film being pushed back? Because it was supposed to come out the end of last year, and it got pushed back to Valentine's Day this year. And I was like, listen, I understand they want to, Neon wanted to throw all their support behind Parasite, but it's bullshit to me. Like, it's such bullshit. Like, you can have multiple, foreign language films, and it's just anyway, I could go on and on, but I will not. But anyway, it's out now. Go see it. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's romantic. It's heartbreaking. It's everything. It runs the spectrum of emotions, and it's wonderful.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the Boston Israeli Film Fest. So, Evan, you saw some films, so why don't you tell us about them?
Yeah, this year is the second annual Boston Israeli Film Festival. It's put on by Boston Jewish Film, who also runs the Boston Jewish Film Festival. This festival, the Israeli Film Festival, is a group effort sponsored by the CJP, which is the Combined Jewish Philanthropies, and a few other groups. It's a really awesome kind of short festival. I mean, it's about a week long. They showed 9 different pieces. Last year they showed a little bit more Israeli TV. This year I think they only really had one TV show that was part of the lineup. But the first film that I saw was a documentary called Breaking Bread, which was very entertaining.
I'm already hungry.
You should be. It's a really fascinating story. It centers on Dr. Nof Atamna Ismail. She's the first Muslim Arab to win Israel's Master Chef.
Ooh.
And she founded this really awesome food festival called the Asham, or Arabic Food Festival, where what they do is they pair Arab and Jewish chefs together to team up to make classic Arab dishes and put a spin on it. So it's this really cool collaborative effort, and it's bringing people together and mixing different styles. And it's just, the documentary opens with a quote from Anthony Bourdain about how, food may not bring about world peace, but it's a start. It's that kind of a thing. So it's obviously it's very focused on how food is a uniting thing, and it brings people together. And especially in this context, Arab and Israeli or Jewish food is very similar. They pull from a lot of different things, and they describe the idea of what they call Levantine food, which is really Israeli, Syrian, Lebanese, Iraq, Iran, that whole region has made this style of food. And there's such a rich backstory and history to it, and there's just so much tied up in the food. But everyone in this area has they love food, and they can agree on food even if they can't agree on where the borders to their countries may be. And so, I mean, it's a little bit idealistic, the documentary, about how people are whatever, screw it, let's eat food and let's have fun. But it does what any great food documentary should do, which is give you just jaw-dropping, tantalizing, mouth-watering shots of food. Just things that look absolutely fucking delicious. And it's a blast because you get the backstory from the main woman in it, Tamna Ismail, who had a mixed Jewish and Arab background growing up, and so she talks a lot about that and how that influenced her, kind of feeling like she was kind of straddling communities and not feeling entirely like she belonged in either one, and kind of finding ways to bring both aspects into her life. But then also finding out from the chefs, what are their influences? Where are they from? What are they into? How did they get into cooking? And then seeing them collaborate together is just this incredible process.
Yeah,
and it's so much fun to watch. And all the food looks delicious, and I want to eat all of it. And, I'm so glad that I watched it. It was a great movie to start the festival with.
Was there anything as delightful in it as a Thai peanut noodle?
Ooh,
there was tons of delicious. There's a whole section on hummus and making hummus that was just amazing. All kinds of different dishes that you're just oh my god, that looks so delicious. Even things that I wouldn't normally eat. They had a lamb dish, and I'm I wouldn't eat lamb, but that looks really good. So yes, highly recommend Breaking Bread.
All right.
Okay.
That was awesome. Another movie I saw was a movie called Forgiveness, and that was really interesting because it was by the same guys who did a movie called Maktub, which came out on which was on Netflix maybe a couple years ago. It's the same team, Guy Amir and Hanan Savian. I guess I would kind of describe them as kind of like the Israeli version of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost at this point. Like, so they made this movie a couple years ago called Maktub, which is about these guys who are, they're gangsters. Like, they're like mobster guys, and they decide that they're going to use their mobsterness for good and start trying to do good deeds for people. But it's like their mobster version of good deeds, which is, it's really funny movie. And this is kind of similar. It's about these two friends, Nissan and Shaul, and they're, you know, like kind of idiotic thieves. And there's this heist in the beginning, and Nissan gets away, but Shaul gets caught and he goes to prison for 3 years. So he gets out, Shaul gets out just before Yom Kippur, and Nissan finds him. And in this intervening time, Nissan has become Hasidic, and he's become very religious. And so he's like, oh, like, it's Yom Kippur, I want to make things right with you, and like, this is all about me kind of repenting, and I need your forgiveness. And Shaul's like, get away from me. I'm just like trying to like, I'm just trying to get right with my family and figure things out. And it's funny, but like in a really dark, like, comedy kind of way, like the hijinks that they get into, because like they end up Shaul needs money for his daughter because she's this really talented ballerina, and she's gotten an invitation to study in London, but they need the money. So his wife has been, you know, toiling away working at this nail salon, but she's not putting away enough money. And so he's like, okay, well then maybe we need to get back to our old, we need to like do like a robbery or something, and then we'll get enough money. And it's just, it's so funny, like the situations they get into. Like there's this really tense thing where they go to a wedding because they're going to rob the house where the wedding is happening. And so just all this stuff goes wrong. Like it's a Bedouin wedding, so people there are speaking Arabic, and Nissan doesn't speak Arabic, but Shaul speaks some Arabic. And then there's just like this whole situation where Nissan not speaking Arabic gets them into trouble. And then like it's nuts. They end up getting the money, which is insane. They end up like stealing the money, and there's this whole kind of like running theme throughout the movie. And I like this because Israeli films, like people forget that it's a regular thing in Israel that there are air raid sirens all the time. There's rockets being shot into Israel from Gaza and other places, and like it's just a fact of life. You hear the air raid sirens, you go to your bunker. It's a thing there. Like they have bars and bunkers and things like that because you could be there for a while. You don't know when the rocket fire is going to end. So they rob this place. They're getting away in their car, and then they hear the air raid sirens. So Nissan's like, oh, we got to get out of the car, and they take cover. And they're like, Shaw's like, no, that's a terrible idea. So they take cover, and then a rocket hits their car and blows it up with the money in it.
Whoa.
Are they in the car?
No, they take cover,
okay.
but while they're waiting, their
Got
car
it.
gets shot with a rocket and blown up with the money in it that they're supposed to like.
Shit.
And there's this whole thing about there's this like gangster that figures out that, you know, this robbery happened, and he feels like he's owed a cut of the money from like the original robbery, and then he's like, it's nuts, but it's like really, really funny. And it all comes together in like this really entertaining way. There's this whole thing about they can't find the money from the original robbery. Like Nissan can't remember where he buried it.
Always draw a map.
Yes.
Or leave one of those little scrapers in the snow like in Fargo.
Well, and the funny thing is, too, it's a situation where he buries it close to the border with Gaza because he's like, oh, nobody will hear. You know, the cops don't really patrol this area, or the soldiers don't really patrol. But then because it's there, he forgets where it is because it's like the middle of nowhere, essentially. Very funny movie. Highly recommend Forgiveness. And I saw a documentary last night that was really good. It's called I Was Not Born a Mistake. She is Orthodox now, and she's a rabbi, but it's interesting because it traces her journey from being born a man, living as an Orthodox man, getting married, having children, being a rabbi, and then coming out as gay, And then like everyone in the community shunned her.
Mhm.
And so she was forced out of the community in Israel and in Jerusalem, went back to the United States, and then went through like a couple more decades of like self-discovery and realizing I'm not actually gay, I'm straight, but
Mhm.
I'm a woman. And it's short. It's like an hour, but it's just a really fascinating look at her life and her journey, and it's narrated by her, and it's, intercut with, photos from her life. It's also like showing her speaking to groups. It's kind of like overall, it's like she was giving a talk somewhere and you're just listening to her life story.
Mhm.
But I think it's cool because they wait a while before they actually show you her. Like you hear her voice, and it's a mix of Hebrew and English. It's mostly in Hebrew in the beginning and then kind of switches back and forth between Hebrew and English. And it's really fascinating, and it's just this really emotional thing because she now is moving back to Israel, and she's making a life for herself in Israel and feeling like now she's gone on this journey and she's come back to Israel where she had these roots, and now she feels like she can put them down and like make this new life for herself. And it's an incredible story,
Mhm.
like of just strength and just the things that people have to go through in their lives to find peace and to find a sense of belonging and acceptance. And she has this like really great analogy about how it's like even religiously for her, it was like something that was like, I forget the exact term that she used. I think it's like tikkun or something like that. It's like a religious thing that you do to basically like prove yourself or prove your worth. And for her, this undergoing this transformation to be who she really was like that for her. That was like her thing, and that brought her closer to religion instead of further away from it. But like, it's just interesting to see her journey, to hear her talk about how, people came in and out of her life, and how she had 6 children, and they obviously, when she was expelled, had to move to the US. Like, that was very difficult. And then she cultivated a relationship with them. Then she transitioned, and then she wrote a book, and then they all kind of like left her again, and now only one of her 6
Oh.
children talks to her. And
Oh my God.
she has 2 or 3 sisters who don't talk to her anymore, and like her mother took a little bit of time to come around, but then she was like fully embraced, and she would take her shopping, and like it was a really sweet thing. But it's just, God, there's so much that she has gone through in her life, and she's not bitter about it either. It's like she has been through so much and could be so angry, but she just channels it all into, how can I talk to other people? How can I be an outreach? She has a podcast. She, lectures regularly. She does interviews with people, and she's just amazing.
Huh. So many people are better people than I am.
It
Yeah.
just, it blows, it perpetually, and it's something I'm very aware of as a cis person.
Mm-hmm.
But it always blows my mind how many people turn their backs on people when they come out as trans.
Yes.
It's horrifying and transphobic and awful and just so unsupportive. And I mean, the person's still the same person,
Right.
and it just,
Mhm.
it's just unbelievably awful that, I mean, yeah, the struggles to self-acceptance are so, hard in general, and especially when you add a layer of, being trans, considering all of the, transphobia out there in our society, and it just, anyway, I digress, but it's just awful. And that's, this woman's story just sounds fascinating.
It is. It's absolutely fascinating. And I think it's perfect that it's around an hour. I feel like it gives you a really good perspective on who she is and where she's been and how she's gotten to where she is without feeling like you're sticking around too long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just feel like sometimes in documentaries, it's better to keep it shorter if you feel like you can say what you need to say more succinctly rather
Mhm.
than kind of like try to invent additional situations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say
Oh.
I'm really curious to see it because I just think it's interesting to see how how things differ in other cultures and other
mhm.
countries and societies, and
Yeah.
and knowing how some people navigate the world as a trans person in this society. I'd be very fascinated to see what it's like for someone elsewhere,
Yeah.
especially in a very conservatively religious community.
Yeah, I mean, I think that she's found a spot that is very accepting and engaging with her. There's a scene where she's in a clothing store trying on clothes and talking to the woman that's the clerk there, and it genuinely seems like for the most part people have a sense of curiosity in a good way and wanting to understand who she is and where she's been. But yeah, I mean, obviously in a place like Jerusalem, you're going to have like super ultra orthodox people there who are not going to be happy about it. But like if they just show her walking down the street, you don't really see too many people like giving her weird glances or anything. It's just kind of like, it seems like generally a good place to be.
That's good.
Yeah. Better than we can say here. Anyway, so one more movie I wanted to talk about. I just came from this movie tonight. It's called Born in Jerusalem and Still Alive. It's a dark comedy and kind of a rom-com, I guess.
Oh, a rom-com.
Kind of a rom-com, but
I know Dave and I are perked up.
but mostly a dark comedy. So I'll read the plot summary from their website. So when Ronan Matalan overhears a Jerusalem tour guide offering a sanitized version of his hometown's recent history, he's inspired to design a terror tour. His tour, which visits the sites of famous bombings, provides a droll take on the absurdity of everyday life amidst frequent terror attacks. When he meets Azia, an ex-Jerusalemite who moved to Barcelona, he begins to heal from the trauma that propels his tours, deftly blending romantic comedy with the complexities of modern life. Born in Jerusalem and Still Alive, a sensitive and hilarious debut from director-writer Yossi Atta.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fairly good summary of it. I don't think it's heavy on the romance part of it. I think that's definitely an underlying theme, but I think what's more interesting in this is this idea of terror tours. Like in what starts is that he sees someone giving a tour of Jaffa Street, which is like a famous street in Jerusalem, and it's a lot of terror attacks have happened there in Jerusalem, but in this area in particular. And what makes it interesting when he decides to start this tour is he makes it very personal. And it starts out with these two Japanese guys come on the tour with him, and he's like, this happened here and this happened. And it's like, he's explaining the attacks that happened, but he's also explaining to people like how life is there. Like, we made a memorial here. This memorial is different from one in the 90s versus the one in the 2000s. And like, even what we would say in the memorial, or like different situations of like terror attacks, we have different reactions to them. Like if it's, a bombing on a bus, we would treat that differently if a bombing at a cafe. Like, and this idea, it's really fascinating. And it's funny in this really dark kind of way. And it's interesting because he's revealing all this like really fascinating information about kind of day-to-day life and how people handle terror attacks and how they live in a world where this is just kind of a regular occurrence. And the movie does this really great thing where you can tell that there's an area where he always pauses, and it's like a corner where he always pauses. And when he's with his tour, he always lets them cross the street first, and then he waits for the next traffic signal to then cross the street. And for a while, you're like, okay, there's some significance to this street corner. And then you find out later in the movie, after he's been doing this tour for a while, he's had a chance to kind of sit with his thoughts about everything. And then when he's kind of like ready, he reveals to a group, this is where I witnessed a terror attack. Like, I was here, I heard the bomb, I saw the people screaming, and like he had this kind of like repression of this attack, and then he like finally comes around to being able to address it in a meaningful way. And I thought it was really well done, the way they kind of like waited for that point later in the movie. But yeah, he meets this girl on a tour, and the movie's kind of divided up into seasons. It's like, it's winter. It starts in winter, and I think it ends in winter. So it's kind of like winter, spring, fall, etc. You see him on the tour. You see the different groups, and you see the evolution from these two Japanese guys. One of them sticks around and becomes like his assistant on the tour, which is kind of funny. And seeing their relationship is kind of cute and entertaining, especially as like he adds more to the tour. Like he gives people candles that they can light and spots that they feel like touch them. And he has these old cell phones that he hands people. And he's like, now practice the experience of like in your language. In 2002, we didn't have Facebook or whatever to mark yourself as safe. So like, imagine you're calling home and you're telling somebody that you're safe from a terror attack.
God.
And it's funny because it's the kind of thing that people actually really get into, and they're kind of grateful for the experience, and everyone seems really appreciative. And these tours just gain popularity, and they become really popular. And he insists on not charging a dime for the tour. He's like, I will not make this a business. It's just kind of a personal thing. I like doing it.
That sounds really intriguing.
It is really intriguing. And so the romance element, it's not super strongly connected, but like, through his relationship with Aja, you see how this tour and how these things that he's witnessed have kind of stunted him emotionally in the relationship, like in ways that like he's not as emotionally available as he could or should be. And that's kind of his arc of the movie is kind of finally confronting that terror attack that he was, there for, and kind of learning to release himself from that and to like open himself up more, because he is very kind of closed off otherwise. He doesn't do much other than maybe he goes to see his dad occasionally, and his dad is like super annoying in the movie. It's like his dad's like always asking him like come home and like plug stuff in or like check socks for him. He's always like talking to him on the tour, and the people on the tour are like, oh, is that your dad again? He's like, yeah, it's my dad again.
Dad.
So yeah, it's funny, and it's a really fascinating look. I think between that, looking at the idea of terror attacks and in the joking kind of way that it is in Forgiveness with the air raid sirens, it's like this is an aspect of life that I think a lot of people forget about. In Israel, in Israeli culture, you're just used to this kind of thing, and you find ways to cope with it, but that still doesn't make it normal, even if you've kind of found ways to be normal about it.
Yeah. It also sounds like it's a really thinking about, terror attacks and thinking about air raids as like a daily part of life. It sounds, when you're not in that kind of existence, it sounds like it's so, dark and depressing and awful, but I kind of enjoy hearing about the balancing of humor, even dark humor, with that.
Yeah.
As a means to cope, with the daily, like that kind of daily existence. So it sounds like a really interesting and unique film in that way.
Oh, it is for sure. And I really dug it.
Nice.
Sweet.
So yeah, that's the Boston Israeli Film Festival. I have one more film to see tomorrow, Incitement, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Can't wait to hear about that. I think it's time now to talk about the Boston SciFi Film Fest. So that is now in its 45th year in Boston.
Whoa.
I know. Yeah. It's been around for a long time. Each of us has seen at least one of the films.
Right.
So let's talk about
Proxima,
which I got to see. And this is a film directed by Alice Winnicor, who has directed other films. But what I most knew her from was being the screenwriter for Mustang, which came out a few years ago, which is a phenomenal French-Turkish film about sisters who are dealing with going through arranged marriages and dealing with religion and wanting to be free, and kind of this tension of, freedom and constraints that, gender, provides, or not provides, but is an obstacle. Anyway, but so I was very curious to see Proxima, and it stars Ava Green, who is always amazing, always riveting, and this is no exception. Ava Green is absolutely phenomenal in this performance, as I knew she would be, because even in the worst films, she is always
awesome,
delightful, riveting, fascinating, you name it. And so Proxima takes place in the future, and you don't know what year it is, but you do know that the film talks about it's about space travel, but not only has travel to the moon become just regular and routine, but now travel to Mars is happening too. So she is an astronaut and she is gearing up for this mission that she's been wanting to do her entire life, where she's going to be going to Mars. And this is going to be her first time in space. And she's an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And she is incredibly passionate about her career. And she also has a daughter who is like about, I think, like 8 years old or so. And I'm terrible with children's ages. But she has this daughter and she's separated from her husband. And it's basically all about her going through the training process, gearing up, the intense training process for the mission, gearing up for her launch date, and how she deals with balancing her role as a mother, as a single mother, and trying to attend to her daughter's needs while also not being there because she has to be away from her daughter in order to do this training, because she's got to go to this special facility in Russia and to do this. And it's all about that. And it's all about her career and her motherhood. And you'd think, it's funny. I read a review and it pissed me off because it was from a critic who shall remain nameless, that they thought this premise was unbelievable because we've already conquered sexism and women don't have to deal with this and no one questions their integrity and abilities. And I'm like, what fucking planet are you living on, buddy? Because
not Earth.
Right? Like, there are plenty of sci-fi films that treat, gender and sexism as something that, not genders per se, but sexism as something that doesn't exist. And that's fine. I'm fine with that. But I have it is no doubt in my mind that sexism is still going to be around for a long, long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that she's dealing with sexism from her boss on the mission, the man who's leading the mission, who is played by Matt Dillon, and he does a great job playing just the sexist asshole.
He's such a good prick.
He really is. But as the film unfolds, he's still a prick and he's still sexist, and he says these, like, some of the things that he says are really overt in sexism, like when he introduces her to not just the team, because it's only her and Matt Dillon and one other guy who are going on this mission, but when he introduces her to, like, the other people who are kind of supporting them in the training and kind of like the behind the scenes work, he says, like, oh, I knew she would be great because, French women can cook and they're always great. And I'm like, and it's just, it's smarmy, it's slimy, it's kind of gross. But as the film goes on, he is still an asshole because he makes comments like, you're going to have to pick between your kid and the job. And, like, he's a douche about it. But he also, throughout the film as it goes on, he really praises, like, how determined she is and her tenacity to accomplish these tasks that she has to do for training. And so he's not really redeemed, but he's, a nuanced character, which is kind of nice to see. But Ava Green, the best scenes are seeing her with her daughter. The little girl who plays her daughter is so talented, unbelievably talented, and just feels very natural. Like, a lot of times children's performances feel very stagey, or they feel kind of one note, or they're good at, like, one emotion or one thing. But this little girl just feels like she's, conquering the spectrum of emotions in her acting. So I'd love to see her in more because she was great. And her Ava Green's scenes with her daughter are just incredibly tender and very sweet. And they start to grow apart as the distance between each other physically, they start to grow apart emotionally. And, like, her daughter starts hiding things from her, like, as far as she doesn't tell her that she, like, has a crush on someone, and she doesn't tell her about various things going on in school and things like that. And she starts to gravitate more towards this nanny who's taking care of her. And there's one scene that is just absolutely brilliant. And so before the mission happens, the three people, Ava Green, Matt Dillon and the other guy who are going on the mission, their families come to say goodbye to them because they're going to have to go into quarantine and they won't be able to touch or hug their family members before the launch. And her ex and her daughter miss their flight, and so they're not able to say goodbye to her. She's not able to touch them, and she finds this out from the nanny who's been taking care of her daughter. And she's like, I'm sorry, they didn't make the flight. And she has to go immediately from finding out that information to like essentially a press junket where she's got to like smile for photos and she's got to answer reporter questions. And the scene of her smiling next to her two colleagues, and she's smiling, but you can see the absolute torturous pain behind that. And it's just, Ava Green is just masterful in her facial expressions and acting and in her body language. And with I don't want to say a lesser actor, but I'm going to say that with a lesser actor, you wouldn't be able to see that all the complexity of those competing emotions. Like, she's so excited to be on this mission, but she's just gutted that she won't be able to, hug her daughter goodbye.
Right.
And then, so her daughter does eventually come, and they're like behind a glass and they're talking to each other. And her daughter's like, you promised you would take me to see your rocket and you broke your promise, but I guess that's okay. And then there's this kind of strange scene where Ava Green like breaks out of her quarantine and she sneaks out and she does go see her daughter and she hugs her and she takes her to the rocket. And I'm like, and at first I was like, is she going to blow the mission? Is she giving it all up? And no. And then the sun rises and the two of them are standing next to each other at the rocket that she's going to be on. And then she's back in training again. And then you see her going on walking up to the rocket to launch. And it's just, there's something incredibly satisfying about her finally about to go into space and launching, because she talks about, throughout the film, she talks about how she wanted to always be an astronaut. And she tells this story about how when she was a kid, she put a lampshade on her head and she's like, I wanted to go into space. And my mother told me, girls can't do that. That's not what girls do. And so the fact that she's always wanted to do this has been a dream for her, and she isn't letting anything, even, her daughter, as much as she loves her, she's not letting anything stop her, get in her way. And it's just seeing her navigate, balancing that, it just felt incredibly authentic and real and sad, but great. And so it's just, Ava Green is just giving such a phenomenal performance in this film, and I really enjoyed it.
It sounds really good.
Yeah, it was really good.
I agree.
You agree about Ava Green being really good?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's when you're when you're doing the remote recording like I am, it's you don't want to break in as much because you never know if there's going to be that lag and I'll step over you. So,
I hear you. All right. Well, let's talk about The Long Walk, which Evan, you and I both saw.
Yeah. I don't I feel like it's pretty easy to read their like one sentence plot summary, because it is kind of an interesting idea for a movie.
Oh, I absolutely think this is an interesting idea.
Yeah. So the plot summary in IMDb says an old Laotian hermit discovers the ghost of a road accident victim can transport him back in time 50 years to the moment of his mother's painful death.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up what happens.
Yeah,
that's it. That's
there's
the
this
film.
old guy. Yeah, there's this old guy who walks up and down this road in this house that he's always lived in his entire life since he was a kid. And there's a ghost of a woman who died there she crashed her scooter in the woods, and she lets him go back in time. But the thing that's crazy is that like she's always been there since he was a child. Like when he was a child, he saw her and he found her in the woods as she was dying and held her hand as she was dying. So like she's this ghost that's like always traveling with him as a kid and as an adult. And I think that's really fascinating, this woman, because she's not able to speak really the entire movie. And so she has to communicate so much without saying anything. And that is just really, it's creepy, but it's also really awesome.
Yeah, I loved this. I found I was kind of confused through like a lot of it.
Yeah,
because
me too.
Yeah, which and
It's confusing.
it is confusing, but and I actually don't mean that as a criticism. Like, I actually kind of love that the film forces you to figure it out for yourself what's happening. Like, there's not a lot of exposition. It's, and like, I knew right away, like, oh, the old man's the kid. Like, I knew there
Right.
was some time travel happening,
Mhm.
but because I think the editing is done incredibly well where you get
Right.
that. But I was kind of confused. I was like, wait, what's happening here? What's going on here? And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I just waited and got it.
Yeah.
But it's such a fascinating premise, and I found this film just riveting. Like, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and the cinematography I thought was beautiful.
Yeah, it's a good looking
And
movie.
Yeah, and and Maddie, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I don't know if it's Maddie Doe. I've heard both pronunciations. But she is Laos's first and only woman director, which is kind of mind blowing to me. But
Yes.
she this film was just really fascinating.
Yeah,
and-
it's more horror than sci-fi, I would say. There's sci-fi elements to it. Like, the time travel is science fiction
right.
there's,
and there's
like-
the chip in the arms where
Right.
people like pay.
with their currency.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And there's like a weird jet, like a supersonic jet that you see in
Mhm.
the time travel in the beginning, and then it's interesting that the kid version of him and the adult version can exist in the same space. Like,
Right.
he starts trying to give the kid advice as to like how to deal with his dying mother, and he like gives him a tea or gives him medication,
Mhm.
and then like he as an adult can be there with the kid in the room with the dying mother, and then like he thinks he's doing a nice thing by putting the mother kind of like out of her misery.
Yeah.
And then that ends up having repercussions where like he comes back to the present, and the adult version of him has like kidnapped this girl and has like been holding her hostage and like has killed a bunch of women, and it's just like
God.
it's that part is kind of confusing and
Right.
weird. Like,
Right. That took me a little bit to figure out. But I think that's so interesting because you're right. Because like before that, the adult version of him was like helping that girl, helping her, find her mother's dead body. But then when he comes back, it's like she's tied up and like she tries
Yeah.
to run away, and then later she attacks him with a knife because he's been keeping her hostage.
yeah,
Yeah, and there's this really sad moment where he says to the ghost woman who's been with him, he's like, I didn't help any of those women. I didn't help anyone.
yeah.
And she's like, yeah, you just helped yourself. And it's
'Cause-
like, ah!
Because he does think that he's helping people, because he
Yes.
thinks like, oh, I can see these people, I can
Right.
see these spirits, and so like it's my job to kind of help them pass on, or to be, go to the land of the dead.
Mhm.
Which first is this woman, he's holding her hand while she's dying. But his problem is that he's not letting any of these spirits actually move on. He's not helping them do that, because like the woman whose mother was missing, he helps bury her or something like that, and so
Mhm.
she can't, her spirit can't rest because she's not where she's supposed to be. It's just like it ends up coming around to often the time travel butterfly effect style thing, where it's like he knows he needs to just end his own life to like break this horrible cycle of events. It's like he needs to kill the child version of himself, which is pretty bleak that happens.
Oh my God! Yeah, because he burns the house. Then
Yeah, with the
locks
child locked in
kid
it,
in
yeah.
a room. Yeah, it's disturbing.
It's disturbing. And then the ghost woman pours him the tea that
Yeah, and
kills
she-
the adult version of him.
And I thought it was interesting that as he's like dying or about to die, she can finally speak. I thought
Yes.
I was like, oh, here we go. But yeah, it is an incredibly thought-provoking film about selfishness and, thinking you're helping, but really you're putting your own needs first. And what does
Mhm.
that mean? And, thinking about like memory and death and all of these things. Yeah, I think this is just such a great film. And yeah, and I love the blending, as sci-fi and horror often do. I loved the blending of the two genres together. But yeah, it is. I would say it's definitely more horror, but the time travel element definitely roots it in the sci-fi genre. But yeah, but this is great. This makes me want to see other films that Maddie Doe has done,
Mm-hmm.
because I really I found this absolutely just intriguing and riveting, and yeah, I really liked this film tremendously.
Yeah, I would say I liked it. I think maybe for me it felt slow and a little confusing, but I
it
dug.
was slow and confusing.
I dug what it was
Ooh,
going
slow and
for.
confusing? Wait a minute.
Yes,
You
Dave's
just caught
now
my
in.
attention.
Yeah, it's very slow. Definitely takes its time to unfold what's happening. Yeah, but I loved that. I love that it forces you to sit with these really uncomfortable situations and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for that. I know that might not be an Evan movie thing, but
Not quite.
but it's definitely a Megan thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate what this movie was going for. So
Yeah.
that said, I think overall I liked it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I think it was great. I kind of want to watch it again because I feel like watching it a second time, I would,
You might get more out of it.
Yeah. So I think I might watch it again because I really enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was great.
Do it.
Yeah, Dave, you have to see it too because it's great.
Okay. I will do that.
Yay!
Yep. So maybe we should talk about After We Leave.
Yes, which we all saw.
Wrap with that.
But should we talk about After We Leave? So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to out myself and say that I chose this movie simply because it had the shortest running time of all the other movies he sent me.
I was curious
And-
why you chose that film. Now I know.
Yeah. Well, I did read the descriptions of most of them, and I thought, oh, this actually seems like kind of a cool kind of idea.
Yeah, the premise
little-
is great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really great idea.
And I appreciate movies that, as one of the things that I do appreciate about this, and this is like a genre thing, it's when you have science fiction that is, it's science fiction, but it's rooted in a world we understand as opposed to being on the moon or on a distant planet or there's monsters. This is just like normal everyday shit. It just happens to be, tinged with the sci-fi.
Yeah, I think it also kind of falls into the when it comes to low budget sci-fi like this, there's the tendency for people to kind of try to really push their limits with effects and things and really kind of go big with their ideas in a way that usually crashes and burns because there's not really the budget there to sustain it between the story and the effects. And I think this movie refrains from that in a way by saying let's come at this from like a more realistic, grounded perspective. We're still gonna have like the sci-fi stuff, but we're not gonna go crazy with lots of dumb effects or like wild ideas that we're just not gonna be able to pay off with the time and money that we have available to us.
Right. And I mean, you don't have to have, huge effects in order to do sci-fi well. I mean, like the, two of my favorite recent sci-fi films that are incredibly low budget that work phenomenally well are Fast Color and Advantageous. They're both phenomenal films and are very low budget and convey their ideas tremendously. So yeah, you absolutely don't need huge special effects in order to have a great sci-fi film. But yeah,
Good thing too, because this ain't great and there ain't sci-fi special effects.
Oh, yeah. So let's dig into why it's not.
Sure. Let's start with a quick
Amazing.
plot summary though. So this is about a guy who is trying to find his wife who he abandoned 6 years ago before their visa to immigrate to an off-world colony expires. So he needs to find her within a couple of days so that they can go and get on a ship to go off-world because Earth is shit, as we know.
Yes.
Right. It's a third of the planet, or a third of the United States at least, is desert because of climate change and everything. Yeah, everything's just going to shit. So basically, all the rich people have left the planet, and the middle class and poor are what's left over. So you can imagine how that goes.
And that would totally happen. Like when
Oh, for sure.
when that does happen, when people are needing to leave the planet, that is what's going to happen exactly.
And of course, there's the aggressive immigration policies where it's like the people have to be married and a couple and they can't already have kids because you can't take kids with you. And so it's like his situation is like, we have to still be married for this to pay off.
Yeah, there's that scene where he's talking to the woman at like the office about about the documents and everything, and
Mhm.
she's like, "Is your wife pregnant? Because just get rid of it and have another one." And like, listen, I'm pro-abortion, but good God, that
Yeah.
was so
That was incredibly callous.
Yeah, it was a great
Yeah.
scene.
At the space DMV.
Yeah,
She gave the best performance, by the way, in the movie.
she really
the woman
did.
behind the glass. She did.
Yeah.
She totally. I was just like, man, if I met this person in real life, I would be scared and pissed off.
All at once. Yeah, no, seriously, talk about making the most of a small role. Like, that was great.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so Dave, I feel like you have a lot to say about this.
I don't really have too much to say, except, the performances are uneven, sadly. I feel like this is a movie that could have gone a long way with like really solid performances, and it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, sometimes the guy who's in the lead is really good, and sometimes he's just kind of stiff, but I feel like that might also be screenplay related. I mean, there just isn't a lot to this story. It's just
No, there's
all right,
not.
I abandoned my wife, now I'm back, I have to find her. This guy I used to work for is a criminal, knows where she is. He's trying to kill me or to get me to do this thing. Where's my wife? I mean, that's it.
Pretty much. And then there's this woman that he has a backstory with who clearly was more into him than he is into her. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of clinging on to him as well.
And if you're and that's fine. Like, you don't have to have like a really complicated plot or
No.
and that's fine if you don't, but then you have to fill it with something, like a
Right.
lot of really interesting character development or a lot of really, intriguing dialogue and
Right.
asking a lot of complex questions about existentialism or society or
Right.
whatever. But this has like none of that.
Yeah, be about the immigration piece, which
Right.
could be really fascinating unto itself.
Mhm.
Be about this kind of redemptive arc where he tries to find this woman and she either takes him back or doesn't. Which I think the
Yeah.
ending is so frustrating because he
The ending
imagines
is cheap.
he
The
imagines
ending's
this
cheap.
Yeah, he imagines this whole time with her, and then he just doesn't even approach her after he's been through all this bullshit. By the way, where he like has his finger cut off and all this other business, like he doesn't even make an attempt after all that.
I guess the rationale is that she looks happy from a distance. So why ruin her life?
I
more
give her that
than she
choice.
did?
Right. That's what's so ridiculous. And like, it almost would have, because he asks the guy, the boss or whatever. He asks
Eric.
Yeah, thank you.
Bad name for a criminal.
Yeah, I can't remember names, but thank you. It is a bad name. But like, he asks him like, does she have kids? Does she have kids? And like, I guess like if we'd seen her with kids or with, a new partner or something and she looked happy that way, then maybe okay, he leaves. But right, she's just by herself, like, doing some yard
gardening.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, she's living under the fucking power lines. Life can't be that good. Jesus.
That's true. That's true. Also, the violence in this movie is shockingly visceral. Like when he's strangling Eric to death, it is very intense. Did
Oh,
anyone
yeah.
else feel that way?
No.
I felt like it was.
I didn't.
I felt like it was really intense and very visceral, in a way that I was like not expecting.
Maybe I should have felt that.
Oh, you disagree?
Yeah, I didn't feel it was visceral at all.
Well, I feel like the most tense scene and the best acting the lead did. I don't know the actor's name because I've
Brian.
forgotten it.
Stevens.
Yes, Brian something or other. It's when they
Silverman.
put that thing on his neck that made him not able to have like voluntary muscle movement.
Yes.
Mhm.
And his reaction to getting kicked in the balls and getting his finger cut off were really good. Like
Yeah.
very subtle, but also just like, ooh, that's pain.
Mhm.
But then the rest of it didn't really live up to anything. I mean, there was one interesting thing that his friend brought up. There's this married couple that the main guy goes to for help. Martin, I think, is the husband's name. I can't remember the wife's name. And he's black and she's white. And Martin makes a point of saying, like, well, we applied for our visa like 2 years before you guys did, and we don't have them because they don't take people like us. And I'm like, exactly. Why don't we
Yep.
have more of that exploration going on? To
Right.
your point, Evan, talking about the process of immigration or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's just like, where's my wife? It's kind of reminds me of like Val Kilmer in that movie where he plays the Secret Service agent looking for the president's daughter, except it's his wife instead of the president's daughter,
I wonder, like, I'm kind of wondering if maybe they focused on the the protagonist because they wanted to have white people feel like what it's like to deal with immigration. I don't know, but it doesn't really delve deeply into the immigration issues at all.
No.
So if that is the conscious choice, which is okay, not a bad one, but then why not really dig into that?
Lean into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, lean one way.
Right,
Pick a
right.
lane, stay in it.
Right.
I feel like this is just one of those movies that it suffers from a lack of pointed focus.
Right. Because Dave,
for
you're
sure.
you're 100% right. Like that was so interesting when that guy says that. I was like, ooh, let's get into that situation
Yeah.
and let's talk about that. But like, yeah, it's just really kind of dropped.
Or
and-
when the couple
yeah.
corners him in the bathroom at the space
oh,
DMV,
that's great.
trying to get his
right.
visa.
And she's like, I'll do something for you. We can go somewhere else. And like, you know, like this woman is willing, you know, to prostitute herself in order to get the visa. Like, yeah, it's just, I feel like this film has a lot of good ideas or the start of good ideas
For sure.
and just never follows through in execution with them, which is just such a shame because it could have been
Yeah.
great.
Yes.
It feels like the script, you know, there was like one initial draft and then maybe a polish, and there needed to be like at least 2 or 3 more drafts.
Yes. Yes.
Because this is,
Completely
you can
agree.
kind of tell it's just like it wasn't worked through enough. It's just like whoever, the guy who wrote and directed it. It was a, you know, one person, whatever. But it's like you can tell when somebody, having worked in low budge films, you can tell when somebody is either A, loves their ideas even though they're not great, or B, they're just making the movie because they have to make it now because otherwise the money's not going to be available. And these actors aren't going to be available, and these locations aren't going to be available. It kind of feels like a combination of the first and second, you know. So, I don't know. I'd be interested to see what this writer director does in the future, just because, like we are all saying, some good ideas here, but the extrapolation angle isn't the best in this movie.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Completely articulated. Certainly what
Wow.
I was thinking.
Yep.
That's
me
a
too.
first for me. Good night.
You're like, Mike, drop, I'm out.
Yeah.
Not going to top
You know,
that
every
one.
once in a while, you can get through like a movie summary and criticism without really tripping over your own words, and you know, you witnessed it here in February of 2020.
That was pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
I don't think it
Thank
was
you.
the first time. I think I've witnessed
Well, first
it many other
time in a
times.
while.
Oh, okay.
We'll say that.
I don't think that's correct either, but fine.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for defending my my honor.
You're welcome. But yeah, that's I always get frustrated when, you know, you can see, you know, you can see great ideas, but it's like, oh, you needed more.
Mm-hmm.
More time,
Yeah.
more
Yes.
writers, more editing,
More,
more,
a lot of
more,
things.
more, a lot of things. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But does anyone else have anything they want to say about this film?
No.
9.
9.
Niet.
Niet. All right. So that's going to do it for this episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. These are the films that we saw. Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Definitely go see. The Boston Israeli Film Festival, which is going on right now. Breaking Bread.
Yes.
Forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I Was Not Born a Mistake.
Yes.
And Born in Jerusalem.
And still alive.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that's a yes for that one too.
Oh, of course.
Okay. And then the Boston SciFi Film Festival is also still going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Proxima, yes.
Yep.
I would say C. The Long Walk.
Yeah.
I would say definitely C. Evans a more reserved C.
Yes.
And then After We Leave,
Maybe.
maybe for the premise and ideas.
Yeah. Why not?
Maybe.
Support
Why not
a local
indeed?
filmmaker.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I always am reticent about. I always want to obviously be. I think we all want to obviously be honest about things, but I always feel guilty when it's, you know, a low budget, you know, small independent film, because it's like, I know you're like, you know, you don't have a lot of resources and whatnot, but yeah. So a tentative, go see. All right. So, Spoiler Piece. You can find us at various places. You can find us at spoilerpiece.com.
Yep.
You You can find us on Facebook at Spoiler Piece,
Mhm.
Twitter at Spoiler Piece, Instagram at Spoiler Piece. There's
Yep.
a theme here.
There is.
Mhm.
You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can hear us on Stitcher.
Yeah, we're on
Okay,
Stitcher.
Thank
We're
you.
pretty
Thank
much
you.
anywhere.
I just had a brain freeze.
No, it's okay. Pretty much anywhere you
yes.
get podcasts, and obviously,
Spotify, iTunes,
Mhm.
you name it, all the good places. And you can email us.
spoilerpiece@gmail.com.
Thank you. You can also give us a call at
86221-PEACE.
leave us a message, leave us
Mhm.
comments. We love to hear from you.
Yeah. Shoot us a message.
Yes.
If you like the show, rate and review us. Go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece, which will take you to your preferred platform of choice.
Yes. And speaking of if you like us, please subscribe. And please, if you really, really like us, go to our Patreon page and you can give us $1. For $5 a month, you get
Ooh.
perks
Mhm.
like voting in monthly polls
Yep.
and listening to weekly exclusive audio. Like
Just for you.
just for you. We do it. Like this week, we did an Oscars recap.
Mm-hmm.
And for $10 a month, you get those previous rewards as well as you get to tell us what film to watch and talk about
Yes.
each month.
And we're owed some choices from
We
our members.
are owed some choices. And there will be a poll coming up for the month of February.
Mm-hmm.
Woo woo.
Yeah. All right. So my name is Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance film critic, editor of Bitch Flicks, member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can find me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld and on Instagram at TheOpinionS.
My name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent, co-chair of BAFCA, co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living, and you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly, Orlando Weekly. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Dave Sees Movies.
We'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.